This is episode 235 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Control and Compound Financial. They teach real estate investors how to multiply their wealth using infinite banking strategies. For a complimentary wealth coaching session or to learn more, visit www.controlandcompound.com/Andrew Hines. Welcome to episode 235 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. I've got Serena Holmes on the show to talk about private lending. So Serena is a career entrepreneur. She went to school for journalism and ended up doing marketing promotions for a company while she was finishing up school, and before she knew it, she was a full-time entrepreneur as an events coordinator with up to 1,000 independent contractors working under her. So no small task. And then she translated that into selling the company through a mergers and acquisition company, and now she works full-time private lending. So she has a base of capital that she uses to lend out, and she's also got her realtor license. So today we really focused in on developing yourself, educating, learning, hiring coaches, getting education externally in other ways, and then taking that information and implementing it. And I think that's so huge in this specific community. There are just so many people that are big on personal development and education. I consider myself very fortunate to have so many of them around me because the mindset is contagious, and I'm constantly learning, and I'm constantly adding new, very valuable people to my network, which I appreciate. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode, digging in on this topic. I want to remind you that if you're enjoying this podcast, please share it with somebody that you think it could help. There are just so many different podcasts and so much different content out there these days that the biggest and best way that this thing can continue to grow is by you sharing it. So I would greatly appreciate that. And then, of course, if you haven't already reviewed it on Apple Podcasts, that's another big thing that really helps the show to grow. So I'd really appreciate both those. If you haven't already done that, please do. And if you, of course, know somebody that would benefit from the show, please share it with. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the episode with Serena Holmes, episode 235. Please enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. I have Serena Holmes on the show, a friend of a friend connected us. And today, I guess we're going to talk about some private lending and other things.
Yeah.
Serena, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So starting things off, can you just give us the backstory you just did for me off camera, which I forgot to tell you. Don't tell me anything until we get the cameras rolling.
Yeah.
But give me the high level backstory on you, what drew you to get into private lending in the first place, or real estate investing in general.
Yeah.
And then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So I guess looking back, I had my own business for 18 years that I just sold last year. And I think I was about 8 years in, and I was like, I've been winging it this whole time. Like, I'm sure I'd benefit from a coach. Like, there's lots that I don't know. And the biggest takeaway that I had from my first coach was that I had too much money in the bank, which is a good problem to have as a business owner. So, you know, at the time I had probably a year and a half worth of operating costs, and she encouraged me to start investing it. And at the time I, went through the process thing, well, I'll just buy a rental property. Like, that seems to be the first step that most people take. And I didn't feel like I could qualify for very much. So I was trying to consider other options. And at that time, the dollar was at par. So I decided to buy a short-term rental in Florida instead, because I could buy it for cash, like at $125,000.
So this was back when?
That was 2013 that we bought it.
Decent time to buy down there.
It was a little later. Like, obviously the market had started to rebound a little bit, considering say the crash was in like 2008. Yeah. But the whole point was the dollar's par. I knew that I could benefit from
still a good time to buy down there.
Not being par eventually. I knew that it wouldn't take overly long for that to kind of bounce back the way that it had been. So we went down that process and learned a lot. I mean, you have to have certain things set up in order to be buying in the States, to manage paying bills. Their systems are a lot different than ours are here. The biggest trouble we had was just vacancy. And, I thought we'll be booked most of the year, and we were booked maybe 3 months of the year. So we had a lot of issues with just keeping it booked because it wasn't a hub for people coming down. But kept it, doubled my money in 4 years. Yeah. And then I was like, what now? What do I do? So my events agency started staffing events with Keyspire in Texas and Florida. And that was just a scalable solution for them. So they could send down 1 or 2 people from their events team. We'd staff up the rest.
So that was your business, a staffing agency?
It was event staffing and event planning. So it was a bit of both, depending on what people wanted. And then obviously Keyspire got on my radar. I had all this money sitting there that I wanted to reinvest with, and I just hadn't decided what my next move would be. So I went to their first event with Mike Holmes Jr. and Darren Voros, then got sucked into their system and then went to their investor summit. And, I had a very clear idea that I wanted to use the cash to buy properties with and use my HELOC for other investing. So I did a fair amount. Like I bought 2 properties, invested in 3 syndicated mortgages and a land deal. So did a lot all at once. And then a girlfriend I was talking to, and she's like, you have to meet my mortgage broker. You should do private lending. Like I make more doing that than I do from my business. And then I exclusively started working with him for about 3-4 years. And then I just expanded that through the referral network within Keyspire last year.
So are you working direct with borrowers now?
Both. Yeah. So I work with 2 mortgage brokers, and then I work with probably 8 or 10 different companies and people.
Okay. And are you investing like your RSPs, or is it all just cash?
So I use my home equity line of credit. So obviously when I started, it was 3%. Now it's obviously gone up, but I'm primarily lending out anywhere from 16 to 18%. So then I'm obviously making that spread.
Okay, so you make a spread, so you're doing like seconds and thirds and stuff like that?
Primarily unsecured P notes.
Okay.
Most people are like, what? But, usually there's almost always a property that's included in that, or there's like a larger development and stuff like that.
Well, and the covenant, I think that you can get yourself into trouble even with secured deals if you're lending to the wrong people. Or unqualified people who aren't capable. Yeah. I think part of the benefit for you is that you're lending to people who have a track record of doing good business in real estate.
Absolutely. It doesn't mean that things can't go wrong. Like even right now, I've done 60 deals in 5 years, and for the most part, most things have gone smooth with the exception of a couple delays. And I have a borrower that I've worked with 3 or 4 times, and he's been a little bit late right now. So I'm able to put a lien on his primary residence. It's written into the agreement that way. So I do have leverage.
So do you have like a lawyer do this up for you, and then it doesn't get registered unless there's a default?
That's correct. Well, he's in default by just 1 month at this point. So the demand letter has gone out. The lien is already set up. So
you're able to do that immediately. You don't need anything special. It's already pre-written.
Everything's already set up and ready to go. So I'm hopeful that everything will I think it's just he's in like a cash crunch situation. But, he kept saying, well, it'll be next week or the week after. And, that's happened a few times in a row. So, I mean, my general parameters are no more than $50,000 a deal. So it's not like this is going to bankrupt me if I can't get it. Of course, I want to resolve it.
That's wise. Yeah. Like not putting all the eggs in one basket. And I particularly would have trouble with that strategy just for that exact reason. Just not being in control of things is something I have had to coach myself on being okay with sometimes. But, when you're not in control of things, obviously no one cares about your money as much as you do.
Of course.
And you got to have a way of hedging. And that's a great idea to just kind of limit it at 50.
Well, I'd rather have like 20 deals at 50 than 2 deals at...
I mean, there's more administration. I mean, obviously from an administration standpoint, 2 at $1 million each is, great. But...
well, it's not that much. I mean, you obviously set up your deals, and then at that point, you're just getting your deposits and stuff like that, right? So it's really not that much work on my end. But I kind of fell into it more so because... I was planning to start my family, and I wanted to take a step back from work, and I just thought I'd rather leave that retained money into the business. Yeah. So I really ramped that up in 2019, cut my payback in half, and then COVID happened. So I didn't want to take any money out, but I was able to literally just dial up the private lending, and I've been living off of it for the past 3-4 years.
So how much money have you allocated for that business?
Right now I use my HELOC, so there's probably about $600,000 there. And then I also used some money that I had in my business, which was probably around $400,000 or something like that.
About
$1 million out. But when I actually run the numbers in terms of like what will come back based on like all of the investments, I'm probably $400,000 or $500,000 ahead of that based on some of the things that I have are like longer term plays that would come back.
Oh, so like you're just saying you'll recoup more.
I recoup what I have, and
like a land deal. Like, are you in equity land deals as well?
A couple, yeah.
Okay, so those are growing. They're accumulating.
Exactly.
I mean, hypothetically, if you were, say, for the example that you were just borrowing $1 million on a HELOC, we could run a number on that. Say you were able to get 16, even 15% on that consistently. Yeah. So then that's $150,000. what would you be paying on that right now if it was all the HELOCs? It would be like 7 and a bit.
Paying 7.7, I think at the moment. So
7.
when I started it, I was paying me $1,500 a month in my HELOC. Now I'm sitting around $3,700, but I'm still bringing in obviously like much more than that. So,
well, we did the example. So that's a $73,000 a year profit. On borrowing the bank's money, if you can get those numbers. Now, not everybody's going to pay those numbers. Some people still pay less. Some people pay more. Depends on who they are and how established they are.
And
right?
it's changed. Like at the beginning of last year, there were some deals that I did that were in the 12 to 14% range. And that was fine because no one knew all of a sudden we're going to get hit with like 12 mortgage rate increases in a row, right? Yeah. So I'm still profitable. But now, obviously, as those come to maturity, I'm either negotiating higher interest or I'm rolling them into other deals. So it just depends on what the opportunities are. And by you know, I have a big list right now of people constantly raising, like to the point that I can't fulfill everything, but people will come to me asking sometimes.
And you're getting out there too, right? You mentioned off camera that you're doing the Synergy Masterminds. You're getting around a lot of people, like getting yourself out there and just being a convenient access. Like you're naturally gonna, hey, you got some money? Okay.
Well, and people, I think when you start sharing it, like I think the reason I started doing podcasts in the first place was because I wrote a book. So I was like, I'm going to promote my book and get in front of all these other networks. But then other things would come up around real estate and investing. And the reality is that a lot of people that would watch them are not in CaseFire, Synergy, Wealth Genius. So they have no idea that this exists. And obviously that sounds attractive to think you could be making passive income with access to what you have or using, say, registered funds that are dying in the bank at 5%, right?
That's a big one. Like getting the RSPs working is something that I think that so many people could take advantage of, like through either private lending or like equity investing.
Absolutely.
Like REIT investing, like District REIT's a sponsor of this show. And that's something that they do with the RSPs. Like that's a whole world that, like you said, a lot of people aren't aware of. I think that people who listen to these podcasts, a lot of them already are. But then again, there are some people kind of coming in from knowing absolutely nothing about real estate. And
well, I mean, from doing these podcasts, I started having probably 3 or 5 people reach out every time I did it. Even people in the States. Like when I did Joe Fairless, I had all these Americans reaching out. It's like, well, I can't help you. Like, I don't know anyone in the States. So just in terms of investing across the border, I wasn't sure exactly how that would play out with their taxes and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. So you haven't done that yet.
So I hadn't done that. But the purpose is that like I started tracking all of these people. And that way, when I knew people also raising, I could at least be like, well, I'm aware of these opportunities and stuff like that now, just to introduce them to what's out there should they want to move forward. So, you know, even one company that I'm connected to, I was able to bring them close to $1 million for one of their deals just by sharing it with like 20 people. And, you know, I think it's been nice and fulfilling to know that I can help other people achieve some of their goals when it comes to their finances. Like I can only do so much myself, right? So it's mutually beneficial to kind of connect some of these people that maybe aren't in these groups and maybe they don't have dreams of having a giant multifamily portfolio, but they do obviously want to benefit from the passive income.
So they're just wanting to put some money out and, you know, people looking and then just connecting them.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. Talk to me a little bit about the backstory. Like, are you still doing the event planning business? You know, what's your typical week look like? Give me an idea of how that all works.
Well, everything got turned upside down. So like I said, I was looking to start my family back in 2019. And I had one employee that I had promoted and trained to be my mat leave replacement. I'd had her for 6 years. And she resigned 2 months after my daughter was born. So I had a bit of a panic attack. I was like, how do I run my business? Like, you know, there's 10 of us full-time, 2,000 plus part-time across Canada and the States.
You had 2,000 part-time employees?
Well, event staff. So they're independent contractors. So they work event to event. I mean, you always have...
How many direct employees?
10 at full-time.
10 full-time. Okay.
Yeah. So I basically ended up signing with a mergers and acquisitions company to sell the company. And then literally COVID happened like 3 weeks later.
So events were just out the window.
Well, yeah, like we lost 300,000 or 400,000 in booked business. We lost over $1 million in our pipeline, like in days. Like it was in literally very, very fast. And good luck selling a company during a pandemic. So
you had to wait that all out, right?
Yeah. So all that was happening. So I basically let my team go. I kept one person just to be able to scale when we did have things coming up. Like, you know, obviously we had lockdown for 6 months. Maybe we could work like October to December, then we're in lockdown again. So that was this whole like roller coaster.
Oh, that would have been a horrendous situation.
So my focus was just keeping it going so that I could sell it and have something to sell when we came out on the other end of it. So really the true value of the business at that point, like I didn't have employees. I had no office anymore. It was our business online. So we had done a lot of SEO since 2012. We still ranked on the first page of Google for hundreds of keywords. So that was really the value to other agencies. So the one girl I kept resigned a year ago last January. And I just talked to the mergers and acquisitions company and I said, you've had 2 years to sell this. Like, hasn't happened yet. Now my back's against the wall because I know we're going to get very busy and I don't have the time to dedicate towards this. I know I'm not going to build it back up to where we were. And at this point, I'd already transitioned into getting my real estate license, all of the real estate investing. And I couldn't see myself going back to the volume that we were used to. So I had it sold in 2 weeks. Like I got a release. I spoke to 15 agencies. I had 6 interested and 4 offers. And it was like done in 2 weeks. And then we closed 2 weeks after. So it moved very, very quickly at that point. That was February of last year.
Okay.
So we closed on Valentine's Day.
So, and with that, you were able to put some more money into
I was able to kind of move away from everything else.
So now it's exclusively mortgages and you have your real estate license. Yep. Are you doing deals yet?
I'm doing some. Like I kind of wanted to have a slower entry into it just because my daughter's young. So I wanted to like have the weekends at the cottage and enjoy the time when she was small. So How
old is she now then? 3?
3.5. So we've been enjoying that time. And so I've still taken clients, but I'm not like buried in open houses on the weekend and I'm not outdoor knocking or anything like that.
How do you find the difference? Like having done the business you did, which was more corporate, probably you were, just the boss at the top, giving the orders to now you're, working directly with clients, going out. I mean, that's a very drastic change.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously I was in the trenches for the first 10 years of my business where I was brought in for operations. So I was running the events. I was doing the bookkeeping.
Well, you wear all the hats early on.
Wearing all the hats. Like for 10 full years, I did all of that. And then we got to the point where I was finally able to start like hiring more people, delegating and stuff, even when it came to the sales. So at the end of the day, when it's your business, like there will be times that you always get sucked back in. So it's, I think the biggest difference is that we were very much like B2B. So we're dealing with corporate clients. Obviously, there's not a lot of, doesn't mean emotion can't get involved, but it's not like an emotional business.
That's great.
It's transactional.
So nice.
It was good. As a residential realtor, I can tell you it can be very emotional.
That's very different. Yeah.
So I think that's been interesting. Like I've had a couple of clients going through divorces, going through different stages. And I would say like I've had some really amazing clients, and then the other 50% made me question never getting my license. I'm like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
So
what's your methodology for growing that business? Is it just referrals from people that are in your network?
So I did try some things in the beginning. Like I sent out mailouts for about 5 months. I had a lead gen system, and those were all very costly. And I'd say from doing 5 months of mailouts and 5 months of lead gen, I got one booking.
Where were you mailing out to?
So my area in Pickering. So like just farming the neighborhoods kind of closer to me.
So you're just geo-farming specific area? How many houses approx?
I think I started with 7,500 houses my first month, and then it's so expensive that I cut it back to like 3,000. So between both of those, I still probably spent like 10 or 15,000 and ultimately got, a couple clients out of it, but not like for the spend you would expect it to be more.
I was talking to a guy that he was on the podcast. I got to go back and listen to this podcast. I think he said he had 300 houses on his little geo farm list, and he had like something like 7 active clients out of it.
I think I just have to door knock. Like on as much as I don't want to do it, I think
he would go in that area.
I just got to walk around my neighborhood.
I just wanted to say hi. I wanted to make sure you got my mailing.
Well, most realtors don't do it. Like I've lived in the same house for 12 years and no one's ever come to the door.
See, this is something I always thought would be so fun when I heard about this geo farming strategy. I thought it would be so fun to just have the license and go try that, because it seems like you can, like to a select group of 300 houses, you could look like an absolute real estate monster. Oh, that Andrew guy, I see his mailings twice a month. He's always giving market stats. This guy knows his stuff. Yeah. You can create the image that you are like the master of that neighborhood. And then who wouldn't call you, right?
Exactly. So I think there's that side of it. And the thing is with my business, we were everywhere. Like we're a national business. So I have clients that are all over. So my first couple listings were in Mississauga. And I was like, like for me coming from Pickering, that's that's not ideal.
That's where you want to be more geo-focused and then just have a network and really establish, because a lot of realtors are investors and they end up on this show. And I'm always so fascinated because I find the entrepreneurship real estate blend is very intriguing.
Yeah. I mean, it was complementary to the investing, which is why I got the license, because looking back, we were 3 months into COVID when I registered for it, because at that time, no one knew how long COVID would last. So I thought, well, maybe my business will never operate again. So I just wanted to have something to fall back on. Yeah. But the reality is that I think the investing is more of an interest to me. Like if I can ideally get the seat at the table as a GP doing capital raising, like I would prefer to spend my time that way. And some weeks I could even spend hours on the phone talking to people about opportunities. So I think it's naturally evolving that way. And if I could just take maybe 1 or 2 real estate clients at a time and then just put that money towards other investing, that would be like the perfect world, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So. Yeah, just take on a few. That makes total sense, right? Not wanting to go crazy with it. As I was sort of getting at before, like I think just having a really great network of other realtors in other areas where you can take a piece of those clients, like they can handle them, and then you don't have to do it, and then you can just take a lot of little pieces. Yeah, I'm big on multiple streams of income, so
absolutely.
I just get that churning, get it generating, and then just keep building. And that's one of the things. Like I started as an exclusive real estate investor. I guess I was an entrepreneur as a mortgage agent, but I've really started to think more like an entrepreneur, and that everything should generate money. Like there should be money coming from all kinds of different areas. Yeah. A part of that, even having sponsors of the podcast is before it used to just cost money. Now it makes some money too. Yeah.
Well, I launched my own as well. And the girl that helped me kind of get off the ground said that, like, just pause in the middle for a sponsor break, even at that time when I didn't have any sponsors. Oh, yeah. So I offered my first couple of months complimentary, and then I have now paid sponsors lined up for the 3rd month and the 4th month. Wow. So ideally, like I'll have that covering its costs and then a little bit extra. So
What's
that
your
I can.
What's your podcast about? Just investing?
Inspired to Invest is the name. So obviously it made sense that I just found that as I got to know people, like what I find really interesting is that a lot of times people feel like real estate investing is very elusive and intimidating and overwhelming. And they're like, I can't do that, and then you start talking to people and they're like, no, they're a project manager at Nike, or maybe they were a stay-at-home mom, or maybe they had all these different backgrounds, but they decided to educate themselves, take chances. And now they have these like 8-figure portfolios, or, one group I know, like they've got 500 million under management in like a year. It's these amazing things that they've done. But when you look at their background, like, it's no different than anyone else. They just decided to make a change. So I found that my purpose of the podcast is to focus on where they were, like bridge the gap to where they are now, talk about the catalysts that push them in that direction. And then obviously like their challenges, like the crazy things that have happened and their learnings and stuff like that.
Okay. So on that note, tell me about where it started for you to be an entrepreneur in the first place. Like why did you do that rather than just go the traditional route, get a job, get a good pension, retire one day?
Well, I even wrote a book about it. So it's called The Accidental Entrepreneur. Okay. And literally it's because it was an accident. Like I never had any intention of running my own business, but I had been working in events throughout university. I was working in a gym and someone's like, you should really get into promotions. And at this time it was before Facebook and social media. So I had no idea what that meant. But ultimately I was hired on with an agency sampling Appleton Rum and Grand Marnier at events, golf tournaments, restaurants and stuff like that. And then just through that network, started working with 3 and 4 different agencies. And when I came out of school for journalism, like learned that that's not very easy to just get a job in. And literally this, like my backup plan became my career. So I was offered an opportunity to work part-time with the agency that I later came to own. So I was offered management became partnership 6 months later. And then the woman that founded the company decided to leave for personal reasons 4 years in. So we went through a buyout in 2008, and then I ran it for 14 more years.
Wow. Yeah. It's funny how like a lot of people go to university thinking they're going to do one thing, and I almost cringe at it now because I think most degrees, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but they don't actually go anywhere from a career standpoint. Yeah. Like it's, hey, you learned something and you can know a lot about that, but how is that applicable? Yeah. And like a good friend of mine, he does like web design work for me now, and he got a business degree at school, and then he was just doing graphic design and web design. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I got to go get my like official career. I'm like, man, you like to work in your basement in your boxers. Like, why would you want to go and work a corporate job? And he eventually just said, oh no, this is what I'm going to do.
Well, exactly. And I think it just depends on your skills. Like in in my case, like everything was kind of shifting in that industry when I graduated. So it was very difficult to work anywhere. And at the end of the day, like you have to kind of start in a really small market and then work your way up.
Like for
and
journalism.
I didn't
that's a relevant degree.
Or
it's
wherever.
Definitely a relevant degree. Like if you're passionate about it, you could still start your own independent.
You can, yeah. I mean, I think the skills that I learned still were helpful. Like obviously now even having a podcast,
now you have a podcast, and you can
edit things like very quickly because I went to school for stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So I think all of the skills kind of still came together in different ways. But it just, like I said, it wasn't my intention to necessarily do that. But I think it did work out to my benefit as opposed to working for like a news station.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I imagine like what you've learned, like the ability to take risks, to make logical decisions because you're not controlled by fear. And once people have taken the dive to be an entrepreneur in some level, whether it's just buying an investment property or going full out, full-time business, once you've demystified that, like the world's your oyster. Now you can do so many more things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I feel like real estate investing is a gateway drug for entrepreneurship. And, why we end up talking about it so much on this podcast.
Well, and I think it's just, at the end of the day, it's not necessarily the investing that's so powerful. It's everything that it gives you. Like it's having that financial freedom, or as I've said, the freedom of time. So when I had my daughter, like if I was still running my business, I wouldn't have as much time or focused time that I have with her. And the pandemic was almost that blessing in disguise. And having all the investing to fall back on gave me the ability to do that. Like I wasn't obviously going to go out and get a job like when my daughter is 3 months old, right? So
it's funny how you can just rule that out and then you focus on, okay, how do I grow my income? It's not like the vernacular, like some people, like it's like, oh, I need a job. No, you need an income. Hopefully several incomes.
Yeah, ideally. That's what I say. The riskiest thing is to have one job. And I've had family that, they're so dependent on it. My mom included, worked for the same company for 12 years, was let go, and she literally never really bounced back. Like she ended up working at a grocery store now for the last 15 years. And it's just, was always just too comfortable, complacent, working that job, working paycheck to paycheck. And I feel like I learned a lot from my mom. And it sounds really mean to be like, everything I've done is to end up not like her, like just not have the challenges and the struggles that she had. And I feel like I'm very focused on diversifying my income and having all these different things coming in because I never want to find myself in the situation that she found herself in.
That's a big motivator. My parents were a similar motivator for me, just the way they struggled. And in a time where it was far easier to make it with one parent working and one staying at home. I have 4 siblings. We had a big family, and my dad's a school teacher. My mom, worked home business, but it wasn't really enough. And, I heard that all growing up is like, oh, we can't afford this or whatever. I'm like, I never want that language in my life. Like, I just don't.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm always like cost sensitive. Like I feel like because I was always scrappy, always paying for things myself. But at the same time, it's kind of nice to know like I can still splurge when I want to. And it's not like I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. Like I've never been in a situation where I can't, like you just try to make those careful, calculated decisions.
It's better to, you make calculated decisions. Don't waste money. Like I'll look at our credit card statement and say, this is a ridiculous one. This is a ridiculous number. We should never spend that much. Just because you don't need to. Like there's being wise, and then coming from a place of fear, like I can't. And that I never wanted.
Absolutely.
But the nice thing as an entrepreneur is you can just go out and say, okay, now let's add streams of income. Let's add, what can we do to monetize further? What can we do to grow this? And I'm seeing that in the real estate based businesses like hospitality, what we're doing with our camp and the resort it's all about, okay, how do we take this to the next level? And on that note, what are you doing in terms of taking it to the next level? Like you have your base of capital, obviously that'll naturally compound and grow, but you're also living off of it too. So what's the plan to grow? Is there one? I know you were saying you were kind of, the realtor part, that's a piece. What else?
So last year, I guess it was last July, I put in an offer on multifamily property in Cape Breton that was 22 units across 6 properties. So it was a package of properties. And the way the numbers showed was that it would cash flow $80,000 a year after the mortgage and expenses. So I was kind of happy. Like if I'm putting $500,000 into something like that, like I'd be happy with that kind of passive income. Didn't pan out. At the end of the day, the seller felt more comfortable with the other offer that was even lower, just because I would be buying it sight unseen. Obviously going out for due diligence, but I just felt more comfortable. Like I'm not going to fly out every single time I go somewhere. And again, I looked at that as like
it secured first.
Well, I mean, you can't just fly out for every single property if you're not local.
It's better to get it under contract. It's way better to get it under contract
Exactly.
and then do your analysis and due diligence.
Yeah. So I still have an interest in that, but I think what I've decided is that I'm not going to go and just like BRRRR multifamily by myself. So I'll probably joint venture with someone. I still like the idea of the numbers in the East Coast. So like I've seen some examples for, say, like a sixplex. You can buy for $250,000, spend $100,000 renovating, reappraise it at $900,000, get your capital back, get your share the money on a refi.
At $900?
I've had a couple, like there's probably 3 investors I've connected with that have all shared like really attractive examples. So if I could put money into something like that, maybe even diversify in 2 projects where your capital's coming back in a year to a year and a half, you're still growing that equity. So it's going to be still like a long-term buy and hold, but you're getting your capital back so you can repurpose that and keep reinvesting it like every year to year and a half. And then continue to grow the portfolio that way. Like I think it just makes sense for me to have those strategic partnerships. Like why would I struggle through something like that when there's people that have systems, they have these things in place, like they're doing it, and maybe I can learn along the way and eventually I would do it myself. But I think to get started, it would just make more sense to do that with someone.
Way better to just go, basically get paid to go to university and study somebody who's a master.
Yeah. So ideally, like that would be on the capital side with my business money.
So would you fund that, or would you use?
I would be the money partner. So ideally, I would use that. Money partner? I would come in as a money partner in a joint venture. Exactly.
Okay.
And then, like I said, I'm interested in getting a seat at the table as a GP with someone that maybe is looking to scale and maybe they are limited in their own networks or their abilities or something like that. And then I can continue to grow and have equity there. So you'll
do some raising?
Ideally, like I'd like to work towards that. That was even part of the reason I wanted to launch the podcast, just so that I can start kind of growing that network and that audience. And then obviously on the HELOC side, like obviously that's not going anywhere. So I can continue to keep investing that, and that kind of really funds my life. Like that pays for all my bills and my lifestyle.
Okay, so talk to me about how because this is a business, like how are you running this income through your structure so that you can show income to the bank? Because this is one of the problems. I know other people who do this. I know a guy who does arbitrage specifically. Yeah. He's borrowing and then lending out at a higher amount. And banks don't love it.
I'm sure they don't really know what you're doing.
Right.
So
it depends on how you can disguise it. Yeah. If you have T5 income, that's certainly going to help. A couple of years of T5
I'm not
income.
Disguising anything. Do you mean in terms of buying the properties?
It could be I guess if it's personal. I think in his case, he had a lot of it was just personal stuff and it showed up as income everywhere. But yeah, if you're just showing a nice clean T5 income I have a collection
of T5s that would all go on my income. Yeah. So I think that looks pretty clean. So then you show a consistent
couple of years, you just say, my investments pay me.
Yeah. So that's what I've
that's how I pay myself too.
But then on the business side, like ideally anything I buy, I think would be 6 or 5 doors and higher, so that the buildings ultimately, you're looking at the business income. Like it's not your personal income to qualify.
That's commercial acquisition. Yeah, that's different. I'm more just thinking like you want to go buy your own home one day, but you're absolutely right. On that side, they don't even care. Yeah. For those who are just doing, residential lending, definitely if you were into that business, I would strongly recommend using a corporate structure for it. Talk to your accountant, of course. But for me, like I have a parent company, and then anything I do is under that parent company. So I could have multiple sources of income, but all cleanly come through one T5. Yeah. And that just helps so much when the bank's trying to like
understand
approve you and show consistency in income. Well, I can have a whole bunch of different sources, but it always works out and I have a consistent income.
Yeah, understood. Yeah. I mean, I have my corporate structure as well. It's just because I'm using my HELOC and the interest is tax dedeductible, obviously.
Right. So you're deducting that
on the personal side, and then I have other things.
So you
that
just
come
write
through
that
my
as
business.
a business expense against the T5 kind of thing?
More or less. It's like a reverse Smith maneuver. So instead of like refinancing my mortgage to invest with,
by the company
use
from
the
you?
HELOC. No, I'm not lending into the company. Like it's just, you can write off the interest when you're investing because it's anything to make an income, right?
Oh yeah. The Smith maneuver you were referring to. That's when you
refinance your mortgage to take money out to invest
so that you can invest, and then it's tax deductible.
Yeah. So it's like I didn't refinance to do it. I'm just using the access to equity in the same way.
Right. So you're just showing that as an expense, a business expense. And then on the income side, it's all T5.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. There are, I think, maybe 1 or 2 instances because it's a GP LP structure where they've set it up as a capital gain. So it's a little bit different. So for example, when my accountant did my taxes last year, he thought that I would owe more, but because of how some of the T5s were issued, it ended up actually being less. So I still made the same, but the tax impact was less.
That's nice if you could just not have the taxes.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? Just no taxes.
Just keep finding ways to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered the entrepreneurship, how you went there, what you're looking to do to scale now. Any plans like to do more in the States? I know you started there, right, from an investment standpoint.
Yeah. And I look back, like, I think if I knew then what I know now, it would have made more sense to try to do something more multifamily, just because I think that seems to make sense across the board. I didn't know any of those things. Fort Myers, though. Well, not even to say that was the case, but like just in terms of qualifying, like what I could qualify for, like a residential property versus multifamily are two different things. Like it just, it didn't cross my mind.
I think that one of the nicest things about this community is there's so many people that are just thinking big like that. In the general population, like the idea of even owning a rental property is a stretch. Whereas in ours, it's, it's like, you need to think bigger, big development, 100,000 square foot storage.
And that's what everyone says. They're like, some of the investors I've spoken to, like their biggest regret is not thinking big. Yeah. Because they look at it like, well, if I have a smaller property versus like 100 units, it's actually easier, just have more units under the same umbrella, and it's the same strategy.
Because then you can pay like professional asset managers. Like once you get into the big stuff, the end management of it is way more tidy. It's streamlined, tidy. Like companies want to take it on because they want volume. They're not going to take on your little duplex, but they'll take on, massive buildings, or in my buddy's case for his self-storage, like 100,000 square foot plus facilities. Yeah. You'll find managers for that stuff. So that is kind of a regret of mine too. I mean, it's all learning, but not thinking bigger, not doing bigger. Yeah. Because it's like the same effort. You put all this effort into doing a duplex conversion or an addition or a student rental or whatever, but why not, find a way to get the now money in order and then do bigger. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like again, this just came out from a business coach. So you don't know what you don't know. So at the time it was kind of like, the low-hanging fruit, like not to say that was necessarily easy, because I had to depend on people because I didn't live there and stuff like that. I think a lot of investors are interested in the States because the cap rates are better. The cash flow stands to be better. Like you can pick up properties in some instances for far, far, far less than you could buy here. So I think it's still an attractive model if you can set up the legal structure properly. But I think for what I'm looking to do, it just depends on whoever I decide to join venture with. It's all, where your partner is pretty much where you're at. So then your sales pitch to somebody right now is basically you'll be the money partner, come in with like $500,000 or whatever it takes. And that's how you'll get the deal done. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure there'll be some takers probably off of this podcast. I know, like my phone will start ringing off the hook. Are you giving your phone number? No, don't do that. maybe an email. That might be worse. I don't know. Yeah, you never know. Anyways, is there anything else that you wanted to share? I know we covered the basics. A lot of times we go deeper, but like, what else is on your mind, if there is anything? Yeah, I mean, nothing necessarily. Like, I think we obviously covered a lot. I think for anyone that's watching, I think the main thing to leave them with is just to not hold yourself back. Like, there's so many opportunities out there. And I think like so many people say, like, your network is your net worth. So I think just for me, everything really changed when I joined KeySpire, and especially now joining Synergy and just having all these concepts introduced to me that I, infinite banking as an example, like who knew that even existed, and learning everything I've learned about that, it just blows my mind, right? So I think you really just have to, I've got a policy on my desk, like I'm working towards that. So I think that's a whole other conversation. Sponsor of my show is an infinite banking guy, and he's the first official sponsor of the show. So you're obviously well aware of that, but I think there's just a lot of information out there. You need to educate yourself, and ideally just don't be afraid to take a step and just obviously take calculated action. Like you strike me as somebody who's taken a lot of time and money to educate yourself. And going to KeySpire, I mean, a lot of people who I know came through that program. Yeah. And one of the biggest things I think that program does is it kind of like weeds out those who aren't serious. Yeah. So you get a room full of people who are very willing to take action. Yeah. And that's valuable. And it's only going to be a waste if you don't take action. Like I went in knowing, like, I have this money in my business, I have this money I have access to, and how can I put that to use, right? And still be careful, because at the time, KeySpire really advocated for certain things, and they're like, oh, you could use all of this. And I was like, well, I'm glad I didn't. I used half of what I had the access to in that capacity, and there have been some delays. So had I done all of it, I would have been not thrilled now. So I think, it's still, you still have to be cautious, but 100%. At the same time, just do what works for you. Right. Well, anybody, no matter what, you have to use your own discernment,
of course,
for your own situation and make decisions that make sense for you. Just because, no matter what anyone else says, like, oh, you should do this. No, you shouldn't. You should think about what makes sense for you. Yeah. Concepts are out there. You'll hear so many concepts.
Like, what does that mean for you? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
you got to be able to think through all these things. Like when I went into Ohio and bought my first couple of properties in the States back in 2012, like, I borrowed the money on a line of credit. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I got myself into a bit of hot water. I was too new and I really didn't think through all the possibilities. Yeah. And I used that as a huge learning experience. And it changed the way I did business. So that's great if you can learn those lessons. Hopefully you don't have to learn them the hard way. Yeah. But definitely. So you mentioned a business coach there. Like, would you recommend that people join a program or get coaching? Like, I mean, even on the entrepreneur side, like I know people who are entrepreneurs looking for business coaches, not real estate coaches. Yeah.
So at the time, back in 2012, the whole reason it started is that we were working with Rogers and they'd been our biggest client for about 7 years and then they restructured. So at the time when it was happening, it didn't feel the blow right away because the airport did this mass amount of work with us that year and it kind of replaced the work we did with Rogers. But then coming out of that, I was like, okay, like we really need to bring in new clients. So the two things I did was hire a business coach and started investing in search engine optimization. So those are two big investments in the business. The business coach was expensive, like maybe $1,200 for two-hour meetings a month. And I think I worked with her for 3 months and she was very like high level with some stuff. So again, the investment was one of the biggest things that I took away from her, as well as looking at our metrics and our numbers and dashboards. But at the time, the American Marketing Association has a mentorship exchange. So you get matched up with basically another business owner that can help mentor you in your business. And it was like $700 for the year as opposed to $1,200 a month.
Oh, okay.
And my benefit was that I was matched up with a marketing consultant that he's brought in to find all the flaws in a business and bake them better. So our first meeting was like 8 hours and he totally like deconstructed my whole business, came up with this really thorough action plan. So every month I had to do all these different things. My first course of action was hiring a bookkeeper because I'd been doing all my own books for 10 years.
Oh, good Lord.
Which is very time consuming and tedious. And it just, everything changed. Like I was able to go from spending sometimes like 2 days in a week to like hitting send and sending money, So it was very transformative. Our business, took that hit immediately in that year, but then we doubled and then kept growing like 25-30% every year after that. So I think you've got to be smart, like still interview different options, find out what's out there. But
but where does somebody find such a thing? Like yours was industry specific, right? You found people within
obviously
your network?
We were like an event marketing type of business. The business coach I hired, I think I just started looking people up, interviewed them the same way you'd get like 3-4 quotes. Interviewed all of them, see who I felt like could offer the most value. And then just through my network was introduced to the mentorship exchange. And that's not necessarily like event specific, like marketing can apply to a lot of different businesses. But in my case, I was just very, very fortunate with the mentor that I was matched up with. And I got a lot from that.
Yeah, I'm big on the coaching side of things and just having an outside perspective. Like we can all get lost in our own fog. And having an outside perspective that's like educated and can see and help us see what we don't see or aren't willing to see. It can be because it can be painful, right? And you might not even realize you're procrastinating on some part of your business, but then somebody else comes in and says, that's not as bad as you think. There's a way around this.
And there can be good and bad to that, right? Like that was a very successful coach or mentor, but then I had others that I didn't feel like I was getting a lot. I did that mentorship program again about 5 years later, and I was matched up with the CEO of a very large PR company. And the problem was because she was a CEO of this huge company, she couldn't resonate or relate to my issues as a small business owner.
Right,
so she just couldn't really give me feedback on some of the challenges that I had. So I think that's just something to kind of keep in mind. And on the real estate side, obviously a lot of these organizations now offer coaching with their package. So if you're trying to analyze a deal or consider an opportunity, obviously it helps to have that sounding board as opposed to like, in my case, my husband's a firefighter. I can't be like, hey, what do you think of this? He'll be like, what?
So he doesn't really get involved in any of this stuff?
I've looped him in, but for the most part, like I would be the driver with that stuff. But if I was going to talk about the ins and outs, like he just wouldn't understand it because it's not something that he's pursued or educated in.
Did he do the Key Spar stuff with you?
No, I couldn't even get him to come to the summit with
Couldn't
me.
get him to go.
He's like, I'm going to the cottage. Just like, what? So
Not everybody wants to get
No, it's
into
not
it.
his cup of
Yeah.
tea. Like he's
Gotcha.
more of like, if I need something fixed or built, he can do that. But the idea of sitting in a cold conference room for 2 days is like,
Not his thing.
no.
It's all right. Not everybody needs to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do people find you and learn more?
Yeah. So I think the easiest thing at my profile is Serena Holmes Realtor on Instagram. And then there's my little web of everything that connects out from there.
Your little link tree there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so people can find you through there. Their podcast is listed there.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll make sure that that's in the show notes. And you already gave your parting wisdom. So definitely people need to not get hung up. And it just like the big takeaway I have from you is like you've invested in education, you've taken action.
Yeah.
It's never like you spent money and didn't take something from that and grow.
Yeah,
even if it
absolutely.
was hey, this is somebody I don't want information from. Even that's valuable because then you can learn how to pick a better one next time.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Cool. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming over
you.
and chatting about this.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. There are a lot of people out there talking about the infinite banking strategy and whether or not it makes sense for them. To find out what it's all about and if it's a fit for you, visit controlandcompound.com/Andrew Hines, where my audience can gain exclusive access to books, podcasts, and webinars tailor-made for real estate investors.